She told me she'd already told her friends they could stay with us for a few weeks, starting Monday. She said it casually, standing in the doorway with her shoes still on, keys dangling from her fingers, like this was a small scheduling detail. Not a question, not a lead-in, just a fact she'd apparently finished deciding. I asked how many people. She said, 2, maybe 3. It depends. We lived in a shared apartment, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. It worked because we stayed predictable. I handled the rent transfers, the internet, the building contact, the grocery runs. She handled decor, social plans, and anything involving other people. That was the balance. She kept talking while I stood there, said they were in a tough spot, said it would only be temporary, said it would be weird to say no after she'd already told them yes. I nodded once. She watched my face, waiting for a reaction. When I didn't give one, she filled the silence herself. She said I was being quiet in that way that meant I didn't like something. She said it wasn't a big deal. She said she'd already figured out where everyone would sleep. She gestured toward the living room. I asked where I was supposed to work during the day. She shrugged and said I could make it work, like I always did. That was the moment the boundary crossed. Not because of the guests exactly, but because she spoke as if my role was already assigned. Adjust, rearrange, absorb. She pulled out her phone and showed me a group chat. My name wasn't in it. The plans were already laid out. Arrival times, grocery preferences. One of them joked about crashing for free. She laughed and said they were just kidding. I handed the phone back and said, okay. That surprised her more than if I'd argued. She asked if I was sure. I said yes. She leaned in and kissed my cheek, already moving past the conversation. She said she knew I'd understand. She said I was good at handling things. That night, she ordered takeout for everyone, even though they weren't there yet. She said it was practice. She asked me to Venmo my half. I sent it without comment. Later, she asked if I could move some things out of the hall closet to make space. She said it would only take a few minutes. She said I was better at organizing. I said I'd look at it later. She paused, then asked when. I told her I wasn't sure. She didn't push. Not then. When we went to bed, she was already texting. I could see the screen light up with names I didn't recognize. She said they were excited. She said it was nice to be the one who could help people. I turned off the lamp. The next morning, she left early and reminded me to be home when they arrived on Monday, just in case they needed help getting in. She said the building manager could be difficult, and I knew how to talk to him. I said okay. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table longer than usual. I looked at the calendar on the wall. The notes were all in her handwriting. I erased nothing. I didn't text anyone. I didn't make a list. I didn't rearrange the furniture or clear the closet or think through logistics. I just stopped preparing. When Monday came, I went to work like normal. Update 1. She called me around noon asking why the internet was down in the apartment. I told her it wasn't down. It was just no longer in my name. I transferred the account that morning when I left for work. Same provider, same plan. I just wasn't the point of contact anymore. There was a pause on the line. She said I'd never mentioned doing that. I said she'd never asked. She laughed like it was a misunderstanding and said she didn't have time for this. The guests were already on their way. She said one of them needed Wi-Fi for work and the other was navigating from the train station. I told her she could call the provider. I sent her the account number and hung up. She texted me a few minutes later, asking if I could come home early to help them get settled. I didn't respond. When I got home that evening, the apartment was loud. Shoes by the door that weren't ours. Bags stacked against the wall. Someone had moved my chair into the bedroom. She introduced me like a prop. This is him. He's good with apartment stuff. One of them asked where to plug in a router. Another asked about parking permits. Someone else asked if we had extra towels. I said hello. I didn't answer the questions. She followed me into the kitchen and asked what was wrong. She said I was being rude. She said this wasn't the time to make a point. I told her I wasn't making a point. I was just tired. She lowered her voice and said I was embarrassing her. She said she'd told them I was easygoing. She said I always helped with this kind of thing. I poured myself a glass of water and went into the bedroom. That night she knocked and asked if I could help figure out how long they were staying. She said one of them might need to extend. She said it would be good to have a plan. I told her she should talk to them directly. She sighed and said she couldn't believe I was choosing now to disengage. She said she felt unsupported. She said relationships were about compromise. I said nothing. The next day, the trash overflowed. No one took it out. The bathroom sink clogged. Someone left the door unlocked when they went out. She handled it all at first. I could hear her apologizing through the walls. I could hear her explaining things I used to explain. On Wednesday, she asked if I'd transferred the electricity too. I said no. I said it was still in her name. That was true. It always had been. She frowned like she was trying to remember when that changed. It hadn't. I just always managed the payments. She asked if I could show her where the breaker box was. I said it was in the hallway cabinet. She asked which one controlled the bedroom. I said I wasn't sure. She didn't like that answer. She said I was being deliberately unhelpful. She said I knew exactly which switch it was. I told her I probably did. I just didn't feel like checking. That was when her tone shifted. She stopped minimizing and started reframing. She said this was temporary stress. She said I was overreacting internally. She said once her friends got settled, things would calm down. One of them asked if we had laundry access. She said yes and looked at me. I stayed in the bedroom and closed the door. By the end of the week, the apartment felt smaller, louder, less predictable. She was tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Not angry, just strained. She asked on Friday if I could please take over handling things again, just until they left. I told her I wasn't handling things anymore. She stared at me like she was waiting for the rest of the sentence. There wasn't one. She said she needed time to think. I said okay. That weekend she slept on the couch so one of her friends could have the bed. I didn't offer to switch. Final update. She started missing work the second week. Not all at once, just late arrivals at first. She'd wake up already behind, trying to coordinate showers, rides, keys. One of her friends needed the bathroom at the same time. Another couldn't find their shoes. She stopped leaving on time. Her manager called once while I was home. I didn't answer. The phone rang until it stopped. The apartment became a rotating problem she couldn't step away from. Someone forgot their badge. Someone locked themselves out. Someone needed her to explain the building rules again. She used to rely on me to be the stable part, the one who smoothed things so they didn't spill into the rest of her life. Without that, everything stayed rough. She started taking work calls from the hallway, whispering apologies. I could hear her saying it wouldn't happen again, that she had things under control. She didn't. One afternoon, she came home early, face flat, movements careful. She didn't say anything at first. She sat at the table and stared at the wall. Eventually, she said her manager had asked if something was going on at home. She said she'd tried to explain, but it sounded bad out loud. She said they'd told her to take a few days off to get organized. She asked if I could help just this once. She said she couldn't keep juggling everything. I said nothing. The friends stayed longer than planned. One of them picked up freelance work and needed quiet during the day. Another started bringing people over. Complaints came from the building, notes on the door, emails from management. They weren't addressed to me anymore. She handled them alone. The stress followed her into work when she went back. Missed deadlines, a presentation she'd promised to lead but showed up unprepared for. She said she hadn't slept. A week later, she came home and told her friends they needed to start looking for somewhere else to stay. They didn't take it well. One of them said she'd promised. Another said they'd rearrange their life around this. They argued in the living room. I stayed in the bedroom. After they left that night, she sat on the floor with her back against the couch. She didn't cry. She just looked exhausted. She said she hadn't realized how much she depended on things just working. She said she thought she could manage it if she tried harder. She didn't ask me to step back in. Not directly. 2 weeks later, she told me her manager was moving her to a different team. Less responsibility, fewer projects. She said it was framed as support. Her tone was flat when she said it, like she already knew what it meant. The apartment quieted down eventually. The routines didn't return. She started handling everything herself, slower than before, more careful, like someone who'd learned not to assume a net. We stopped sharing details about our days. A month later, she said she was thinking about finding her own place. I said okay. She moved out at the end of the lease, so there was no fight, no final conversation that wrapped anything up. I kept the apartment. We don't talk now. I hear she's still on that smaller team.